Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents Channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode, I'm going to be having a conversation with my friend Becca Wilhite, author of Beaver Bankers and an authorized IBC practitioner. We had another great conversation. We have had one prior. I would encourage you to introduce yourself to Becca in a prior episode, but we're picking up kind of where we left off, and I hope that you enjoy. And we did. We had such a good conversation last time, right? Where everybody got to be introduced to you, both in your journey of being exposed to infinite banking and starting infinite banking, to now being a professional, to now being a published author in the space, which is really saying something. You know, you and I both have been some years in the business, and not everybody's writing a book. There's some good books out there, but not everybody's writing a book. So I feel like that's a great gift that you've brought to the world in doing that. So I'd like to be able to pick up where we kind of left off in having heard your journey and just have discussions, just have conversations. So you and I, before we hit record, we were just saying how, you know, you had some ideas about things that you thought were interesting. I had some ideas that I thought were interesting as well. And I feel like in general, we could just have, because you and I weekly, professionally, get to see each other once a week, and we're having conversations around what it means to become your own banker from a consumer perspective, but then also a lot from a professional perspective. And not all those conversations are the kinds of conversations that we're having at the entry level, where somebody is just having the light turned on in infinite banking. And if I had to pick, I could see myself having both those conversations, and it'd be to everybody's benefit here with you. I wonder if more time spent on the beginning people wouldn't be better. And you shared some thoughts with me, texted me earlier today. So in general, I guess that's me kind of prefacing saying, well, hey, this is our second conversation. I could foresee us having more in this venue. We already have those weekly masterminds where professionals are getting together, and it's a round table type of atmosphere, and we're really getting into nuts and bolts. And it's great because we're constantly pushing our frontiers forward so that we can serve folks better who are at that beginning part of their journey. But I feel like this opportunity is maybe more conducive to the folks that are at the beginning of their journey. I don't know. What do you even think about that? Let me just I'm thinking out loud. I'm literally thinking out loud here, and you're smiling and nodding. You're so encouraging and supportive, and I know it's going to be a good conversation. What do you think about what I'm describing? I know I benefit from hearing professionals in the space that I respect, having nuanced, detailed, in-depth conversations. I enjoy that personally. I am the kind that will go on a deep dive into a concept that's new to me and that I love and that I'm looking to master myself. But also, there's something to the simplicity and helpfulness, I think, of just telling somebody who you are and what you're doing. And maybe it inspires them at their beginning. Does that make sense? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think as you were talking, the thing that came to mind and that I've kind of been thinking about this morning is we are so trained in America to be consumers, right? Like all the advertising and just buy this thing and your life's going to be better, whatever it is. And I think that kind of seeps its way into the infinite banking footprint as well. A lot of times of, hey, if you'll just buy this product, it's going to solve all your problems. All your money problems will magically disappear. And that's
Good.
not what we're saying at all. In fact, we're saying let's step away from that consumer mindset and let's see if we can create something. Let's be creators here. Let's create something that previously what didn't exist before that could give us a leg up. That's a process that's becoming your own banker. And I think there's a difference. You hear people say, hey, I want to be my own bank. Well, yeah, that's kind of what we're saying, but that sounds like you do something and you're finished. And that's not what we're going after here. We're saying we are entering into a process of becoming something different that we weren't before. And that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It's a lifelong journey of moving in a different direction than we were before. And I love that word, even in the title of Nelson's book, becoming, because life is never static, right? We're always moving in a direction, whether it's on purpose or by default.
Yep.
And so when we consciously make that choice to say, hey, I really like what he's talking about. I would like to become that. Then there's a process that we go through to reach that end. And again, so many of us are in this kind of microwave society. We just want it to happen. I have a good friend, Zach Atkins, and he uses this analogy that I love. He said, "We're not we're not putting popcorn in the microwave. We're planting seeds." So don't
Hmm.
expect a microwave result, right? This is we're planting here. It's going to take a little bit of time. Um, but as humans, I think we're designed that way. I think we're designed to go and create. God gives us gifts and abilities and says, "Hey, what are you going to do with that?" I read an article that talked about a Steve Jobs interview a while back, and you know who Steve Jobs is, the Apple computer guy, right?
Yep.
And he was talking about an article that he had read in the Scientific American, and basically they did an experiment, and they measured all these different animals according to the efficiency of their locomotion. So, how much energy do you have to use to move X number of feet or miles or whatever it was? And
Hmm.
so, the condor was actually, like a big bird, was
Yep.
actually number one as far as efficiency of locomotion. And humans were way down the list. We were maybe in the 20s or something. I mean, it wasn't very impressive for the crown of creation, right? um, so that wasn't okay. Well, that's fine. But then they had the idea, well, what if we put a human on a bicycle and did the same experiment? Well, guess what? Now a human on a bicycle is more efficient than a condor as far as the energy needed for locomotion. So Steve Jobs' takeaway from that, he said, I kind of see the computer like that, as a bicycle for the mind. It's a tool that we can use. And I took it a step further and said, I kind of see IBC like that. I see this infinite banking concept, this becoming your own banker, being a tool like that we can take our financial system and make it more efficient, make it, just something that can propel us forward without quite as much effort, maybe, as in the system that we're in currently. So that might be a really long-winded answer to your question, but that's just some things that I've been thinking about as far as why would somebody want to do this? Why would they want to take the leap and learn a new way of doing things? It's not fast, it's not easy, it's not instant, like the world would want you, so many things that we go after are, but it's the payoff is so great. And I think if you can see if you can get a glimpse of that, then maybe that makes you curious. Maybe that makes you willing to read Nelson's book, to look into some of the things that he's teaching. That you don't have to just be a consumer, you can be a creator. You can create your own financial environment in which you live that would propel you and your family forward.
Hmm. Let me ask you about another word then. So you're saying
Okay.
things like instant and easy. So here's another word. I want you to give me your response
Okay.
because, and I can remember feeling this way myself to a degree. I knew it wasn't, but I remember feeling something like this being discovering that you could become your own banker. That, no, I want to say it in the same way that you just did because you were emphasizing becoming your own banker. I love that.
Mhm.
I love that focus on the becoming, the ongoing action part. But it almost felt magical. That's the word I was leading up to right
Mhm.
there. Magical. And that can be a good thing as far as, and I don't want to say too much here because I want to get your feedback. Um, it's it's a new paradigm, to use Nash's word. It's a
Mhm.
new paradigm. And that can seem magical in and of itself. But going back to the words that I'm trying to link the magical part with the easy, with the instant, because this isn't that. So what's your take if you
Mhm.
ever hear somebody saying something or get the feeling from their conversation that they feel like this is some instant magical bean pill solution, right? Magical.
Yeah.
Is IBC that, Becca?
No, I don't think so. And sometimes we get that, oh, well, that sounds too good to be true. That whole line of
Or is it
thinking
even
it
legal?
must be. Yeah.
It's so
Is it
good.
even legal? Um, but yeah, no, it's not magic, it's math, right? It's math. It's uninterrupted compounding. If you could set that in motion for the rest of your life and never have to come back to zero, if you never had to interrupt that growth of your money, it kind of looks magic, doesn't it? But I think we've never been taught a way that that's reality, that could be a real thing, because we either, we've talked about this before, we either save up for whatever purchase it is and then have to buy that thing and that money's gone forever. We got the
Mm-hmm.
car, we got the house, we got the vacation, whatever it was, but we've lost the opportunity for any growth on that money in the future. Or we take out a loan from a third party lender, banks, private lenders, whoever, and pay interest to them. And so in either case, the growth of our asset is interrupted. And so if that's the paradigm that we're coming from, I guess it does look like magic to say, hey, what if I could capture this money that's flowing through my hands anyway, or little by little, more and more of it as I go throughout my life, and have that start on its own compound growth curve for as long as I'm on this earth, and still be able to access that to meet those needs that I have for myself and my family and others around me. Um, yeah, that can look like magic, but it's just math.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote down two arrows on my paper right now while I'm writing notes from what you're saying and explaining right there. And those were the two things that occurred to me is when you're saying about the math. Yes, people are either aware about that math that you just laid out there so simply, using other people's money on their terms and conditions, paying them interest, et cetera, or paying cash for things, losing all the opportunity on that capital in the future for ourselves because it's gone, it's liquidated. There's the math there, and people either are being exposed to that for the first time right now, or they've heard it or some variation of it, or they got a wispy idea of what that might mean. They've never looked at it closely, or somebody who's actively trying to understand that, right? They're at some point in progression, perhaps, in understanding the math, like you're saying. But then at the same time, here was the other arrow that I drew, meaning that math can either be working for you or against you, but also your own human behaviors can be propelling you forward, moving that arrow forward, or also working against you. So like the math could be as good as the math could be, but if our human behavior isn't matching up to that and we're not working on both of those at the same time, meaning putting good practices into play with the ideal asset, right? The whole life policy that's been structured for banking from mutual companies that pays dividends. That's the math side of that. That's the asset side of that. I kind of break down here recently things in this fashion. There's the philosophy of becoming. I'm gonna keep coming to that, the becoming part of becoming your own banker. I like that you brought that up. The philosophy of that, changing the paradigm. And then Nash had these principles. And then there is this eventual conversation about, well, the process after that of banking. Somebody controls those two opportunities, and you could do it for yourself and profit for yourself. And then the product. So I got a Baptist background, and you can relate and you can understand how I'm just the product, paradigm, philosophy, lining all these things up with the letter P.
Right?
That's
and you're
right.
good to go.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, the math just is what it is. And then talking about that human behavior, because the normal and the natural is what? Parkinson's law, right out of the gate for sure. That's the easy, that's the instant. We got paid today, we go spend it all, fighting that off. So all right, you brought up the math to our attention. Speak on the human element, the human problem side of becoming your own banker.
Becoming, yeah. I don't know if I have really a life motto, but one of them that would come close if I did was actually something that I heard when I was in college, and it's the lyrics to a song by Stephen Curtis Chapman. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him, but this one line stood out so strongly to me in that season of life, and it said, "Look where you want to go. Are you going where you look?" And that just so hit me. And I was kind of in the midst of, college life and who am I going to be? And man, all my friends are going out partying, and do I need to join that scene, or am I supposed to be the good girl, or, and just kind of this internal struggle, and hearing that and kind of processing that a little bit made me think about, okay, look, where do I say I want to go? What are these goals I have out in the future, whether that's for relationships or for career goals or whatever it is. And are the decisions I'm making today moving me towards that or away from it? Are you going where you look? And I think it's the same thing with this. You can say, "Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. I want to, get the banks out of my life, and I want to have a pool of money that we can finance everything that we need and then go invest in other things." And that sounds great. But then we have to make the choice to have the discipline and the habits that would get us to that place, that would help us to go where we're looking. So I think there's two parts of that. It's great. It's very important to have a goal. You have
Mm-hmm.
to have a goal. You have to see where you're going. I think that's where a good coach, a good mentor, a good agent comes in, of helping you see, okay, here's what we have. How can we do the very best with that? What does that end goal look like? And then also coaching you along in, how do we get there? What are those processes? How do we use this in a way that would get us to that end goal? So human behavior is huge, right? If we say, "Hey, I'm going to be my own banker. I'm going to get this policy." I started out, my kind of IBC experience was more a get out of debt kind of thing, kind of
Mm-hmm.
focus, and it completely worked on paper with people. It completely worked on paper. All the numbers worked, right?
Yep.
Just like a diet works on paper. Like this was my struggle here. Man, I could lose 20 pounds easy if I would just do this, and this.
That paper will
But
never pick up a fork, but the people will.
no, that's right. But what the problem is our own behavior, our own habits, how we treat that plan, right? Do we stick to it? Are we disciplined? Do we say, "Yes, I'm going to repay those loans. Yes, I'm going to slide that piece of chocolate cake away," whatever it is. So it's the both and I think sometimes it's easy to get really motivated at first. Of what I'd see in this whole debt payoff thing is people get really motivated at the beginning, but then life happens and they're like,
Yep.
"Oh, well, I don't really have to pay that off because they're not coming after me if I don't." And it can become just another line of credit to run up and leave you off in a worse place than you were before. And that's not to say that I've seen some people do amazing and they're successful and they've reached the goals and done incredible things. And then other people that kind of, I don't know, they kind of lost the original inspiration maybe, and it wasn't that helpful to them. So and then what do people do? They turn around and say, "Oh yeah, I tried that IBC, it doesn't work." Well, it's not that the system doesn't work. It's not that the idea doesn't work, but that you have to take care of it. Just like Nelson said in his book, he said if two people buy the exact same car and drive it off the lot, can you guarantee that those cars are both going to last for the same amount of miles? Well, of course not. If you're going to go and have the oil changed and take care of it and drive it nice, it's going to last a whole lot longer than you can drive a car into the dirt if you don't take care of it. And it's the same thing with this. Our human behavior has everything to do with the success of
Right.
becoming.
Right. Okay. So the second part, so the first part of that was look where you want to go. And then the second part of that was, are you going where you want to go?
Are you going
Yep.
where you look?
Are you going
Yeah.
where you look? Are you going where you look?
Yeah.
So that made me think, the visual that I got in my head was, and maybe you've got some similar experience. I remember telling my boys recently about watching or paying attention to what you watch or what you look at, because it matters. And I can't even remember now why I was explaining it to them, but that principle of pay attention where you look, because it does matter where you look. Maybe it was about driving. It probably was about driving. And this is why I gave them a story, and I'll tell it here. So when we hit our driveway, everybody wants to drive the car up to the house, right? That's just where we are in our family life, right? Like my little girl, my boys, everybody wants to drive. Whose turn is it to drive? It's my turn. No, you drove last time, right? So everybody wants to drive. So we got to talk about, okay, well, you're going to go where you look. So you need to be looking ahead. You can't be looking right here. Can't be looking. You got to be looking where you're going, because that's where you're going. Wherever you look, that's where, and they'll talk about it in racing terms. So the story that I gave them was, I've been on a bicycle before, be talking with somebody, and they go to looking at me too much instead of paying attention to the bike. And I've had somebody ride into my side, and there we both go on the ground because they quit paying attention to where they actually needed to be looking, and it made us both crash. So I like that, and that's interesting. Just hearing you talk about your college experience, and I mean, I was really getting geared up. I was like, okay, what's she going to say? She heard a song in college and a lyric, came to her at an important time, which is really neat to me. All right. I love it. I just told my boys that the other day. I think that's part of the human problem for sure. Paying attention to where you look, there's also some other saying about, where you keep looking or where you look, you'll find what you're looking for, or, you know what I'm saying? That idea of here's what I'm thinking. When somebody's exposed to this idea of becoming their own banker, I don't know how anybody else has a different experience than me because I've only had my experience, right? So there's a part of me that's like, how do you not take the deep dive? How do you not keep asking questions when you learn about this kind of independence, when you learn about this kind of control, when you learn about this kind of math, when you learn about this kind of you doing something for yourself, you're the one in the driver's seat, to keep using these analogies. And how do you not pursue that to, perfection, which is ongoing, right? We're never going to arrive. But I'm saying, I don't even know how anybody stops short of implementing the concept. And that's why I want to have conversations like these. And this is why I want to record them, because these are things that I like hearing your perspective on and other folks, right, that are in the way, because it's an open resource for people that are actively considering the concept. All right. So keep going with it then. Becoming your own banker. That's something that's been sticking out to you. Go with it.
What you just said sparked something in me. Have you ever heard of a term called confirmation bias?
Sure.
Okay, so I used to teach 8th grade, and I taught a class called Teen Leadership. And it was my very favorite thing to teach because we got to talk about real world things.
You taught team leadership?
Teen Leadership, TEEN, right? So we did a lot of, just really practical, real life kind of skills. And one of the sections that was about my favorite one to talk about was talking about brain research and how we're wired, and that our minds are wired to be able to believe one thing about a certain topic. You can only believe one thing at once. Now, you can change your belief, you can change your mind, but you cannot have two contradicting beliefs at the same time. So if I say the sky is blue, as long as that's my belief, you're not going to convince me that it's any other color, because my brain is going to take all my experience and everything I filter from my environment and filter through that lens of that belief. Okay, that's just how we work. So let's say I'll take my own personal experience as an example here. My belief was that whole life was a terrible product. And that my friends that I knew that sold it either were completely ignorant or not the people I thought they were. Okay? So I'm hearing this information about becoming your own banker, and it's hitting that filter of that belief. Oh, but wait, whole life insurance is terrible. So there's no way that this is true. And then you just, most of the time what happens is you just write it off because it's hit a belief in you that will not let it progress any further, right? So, however, you can change your belief. You can change your mind. And there's a verse in scripture in Romans chapter 12 that talks about, don't be conformed to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I think that the Bible and Nelson are saying the same thing here. Rethink your thinking. You can change what you think. And if you're able to change that core belief or that basic, that lens that you're filtering everything through, all of a sudden you see things that you couldn't see before. I don't know that I can really pinpoint the time when I started to doubt that maybe what I believed about whole life insurance was in error. I think maybe it's because I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain to somebody why I thought that. It's just, that's what I'd always heard. That's
and
what
you could
Dave
regurgitate
Ramsey
those
said.
lines. Yeah.
And I knew the talking points, and I knew all that. But when I was really challenged on explaining, well, why is that like that? I realized that I really had no idea how that even worked. And so maybe there's a possibility here that I could be wrong. And so I think it's important for us to just take an honest assessment and say, hmm, is my thought process, is my filter correct? Because if my filter is incorrect, if my lens, the lens that I'm viewing this from is incorrect, then I will have a skewed view of everything you're telling me or everything I'm reading or everything I'm learning. Um, and it hits a closed mind. And so, that's just, I guess that's my challenge. I've heard James Nethery say before that most people's opinion of life insurance is based on someone else's misconception.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yep.
that's true because who really goes out and studies life insurance unless you're in the business? I don't know about you. I never set out to say, "Oh, my dream is to be a life insurance agent." Like I never said that ever.
Right. Right.
um, but at the same time, life insurance is just the vehicle, right? Life insurance is not becoming your own banker.
Yeah.
I've said before, if we could do this process, if we could do it with a box of rocks or a box of pennies, we'd do it with that. It just so happens that life insurance is the best product to implement this strategy that we're talking about becoming, right? We're talking about becoming, we're talking about going down a different road. And to use our friend Joe DeFazio, to quote him from our mastermind group, to move our financial environment from a hostile environment to a friendly environment. And you can't do it overnight. It's not, you don't snap your fingers and you just, oh, I bought a policy, so now I've done that. It's a process of little by little. I'm going to transfer from one environment into another. And over time that makes a huge difference. Not just with the math, not just with the numbers, but with peace of mind.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what is that worth? I don't know the statistics right offhand, but a huge percentage of fights in marriage and problems in marriage is due to money, right? Disagreements over money and stress surrounding money. And then, I have a friend who's a counselor, and she sees marriage and family counselor, and she sees clients and they're paying her hundreds and thousands of dollars to help them fix their relational problems. But then we're going to squabble over a few, what's the rate of return? How much is it going to cost? All this on something that maybe could eliminate some of that. So I don't know. You can't put your life in a box, or you just compartmentalize everything because it's all interconnected. If we get peace in this area, it's going to affect other areas. If we have stress in one area, it's going to affect other areas. And I think, man, I think all that really counts in these kinds of conversations is
Mm-hmm.
that the peace and stability and just the stress relief that this can bring to a person's just personal economy and relationships, that can't be understated either.
Yeah. I don't think that is an aspect that's spoken about enough. Perhaps the connectivity between a good percentage, whatever it happens to be, whether it's half of marriages or whatever, but a good percentage of
Mhm.
marriages not going the distance. And then the top reason or reasons being stress. Okay, well, where does the stress come from that's causing conflict in the relationship? Money being high on the list, even if it's not number one, maybe it's number one, but it's high on the list. And then just realizing, are we actually saying that if we had a better process, like becoming your own banker, that gives you control, that gives you independence, that gives you autonomy, that gives you guarantees, that gives you all these benefits because of what you learn and you can apply, that would help a marriage, that would help then the whole household, that would then help once that generation is changed in its atmosphere because of that implementation. I'm not saying it's magical in this way either, right? I'm just thinking out loud with you. It's not a magic fix my marriage pill, but I am saying, what if that does happen? What does that mean for the next generation? Could it be even more peaceful and more autonomous, and you just can walk that out, um, you mentioned scripture. Here's one that comes to my mind when I think about this out loud is you can read in Kings and Chronicles where it says, well, so-and-so did what was right. And then the next thing you read is, well, so-and-so did what was wrong. And so-and-so did what was right, wrong, right, wrong. And just does this whole back and forth thing. And I know that we can't predict the future, but still, I'm just saying, well, what if we could lower the stress? What if we could put all these advantages in our court? It's not going to hurt the marriage. It's not going to hurt the household. It's not going to hurt the longevity of maybe the kind of legacy that you'd like to create where it could just be right, or better. Use whatever word that you want right there. But that's what occurs to me. All right. Separate subject, going back to something else you said though.
Yep.
And we can return to that one or you say something more about that one, but how do I want to say this? I love having a real holistic approach with my clients anyway. I'll speak for myself. I love knowing what's going on in your business, what's going on in the home life, what are the goals y'all are working towards. Oh, your child's in college. What are they studying? Just all this kind of stuff. I like having a real holistic approach to those conversations. I think we're better coaches the more insights that we have into that kind of stuff. But anyway, I do. All right. So let me do this. My mind's, you should see this page of notes that I've written down from things that you've been saying and everything. And I want to be able to tackle it all. You said something earlier about folks who will say, and you can't change my mind on it. And listen, I'm that way about some things. There are some things that I am persuaded, I am convinced, I am confident in. And it's just that way. Now, I'm open enough, I feel like, to have a conversation. Now, there might be times that I'm not. Maybe I'm not. You should check me on this. Becca, you can be a good friend and call me out, right? Help me to stay open-minded. But I am confident on some things, and yet I hope I don't show it on my face. But when I hear somebody say something, and I did recently, you made me think of a particular conversation that I had where somebody said, and you can't change my mind about it. And I just wanted to say, you're right, because you're the one that said that. And if that's how you feel, I'm not even going to try, even if I were interested. You know what I mean? Just like, okay, that seed would fall on rocky ground anyway. So why would I even try? And again, I'm saying that, recognizing that I feel that it's good to be confident about some things and you are convinced that you couldn't be persuaded otherwise. And yet for the vast majority of things, I feel like we should be open-minded and we should be rethinking our thinking, because that's one of those key principles from Nash that's, to me, obvious now, is part of how you perpetuate this ongoing process of becoming your own banker, leveling up your thinking and your implementation of the concept in life. So I hope I don't have a bad face when I hear somebody say that, but I feel like it on the inside, if I'm being honest, like, eesh.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a
cringe.
disqualifier for something new, isn't it? If your attitude coming in is you can't change my mind, well, okay, then just keep doing what you're doing. It's fine. Be blessed.
Right.
I mean, that's okay.
Next subject.
Yeah,
if we can't talk about that, what are we going to talk about now? We're going to talk about the weather or gardening or.
I'm certainly not interested in changing anybody's mind or beating somebody in a debate. Like, I'm not at all. I mean, the thing I'm interested in is people who maybe are like me that are just looking for a better way. And could I just share this possibility with you that and you don't even have to agree. You don't have to like it. That's okay. I mean, we can agree to disagree and still be friends. Not everybody has to do this. But I think that just giving yourself the opportunity to at least consider a different way. And I know sometimes it can be overwhelming when you think about, okay, I'm supposed to eat healthy and I'm supposed to be great with my finances. And I'm supposed to work out and I'm supposed to be organized and, all the things. It can be overwhelming, but I feel like too, that there are times when something comes to the surface in your life in a certain area. So maybe it's, hey, I'm going to really start cooking more healthily for my family. And I'm going to put my focus there and research and find recipes. That's a goal out there. It's not on the front burner for me yet, but,
Okay.
Or maybe it's something else. Maybe I want to be more organized with my schedule in my house and be a better manager of my time. And there's so many things, but when you feel that financial piece rising to the surface, like this is something that needs a little attention right now. This is something that's come into mind, that's come into conversation in our family, that is something that we would like to do better. You what I'm saying is you can't tackle everything at once. But when that thing comes up that's kind of bubbling up in you of, hey, maybe this is an area I need to go learn about right now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to that and maybe go after those things. I kind of think of it like a garden. I already told you I'm a terrible gardener, but I do get the concept that you can plant different things and it's not that you have to go out and tend to each thing the exact same every day, and each thing
That's
needs the
true.
same amount of water, and each thing needs the same fertilizer. It's what is that thing that I'm growing, what does that need today? And it might not need anything today. And in that case, I'll go tend to the other things. And I think in life it's the same way. If we so often I think we see it like a pie chart. And okay, well, this thing is taken up and this thing is taken up, and we have more things to do than we have pieces of pie in our chart. And that can feel very stressful. But I think if we picture it like a garden, what is needing my attention today, or what is needing my attention in this season of life? What am I needing to grow in this season? I'm not going to do it all at once. I'm not going to tackle it all at once, but I'm gonna go and I'm gonna pay attention to that thing. I'm gonna go see if I can spend some of my time and my attention in growing in that area and see where that leads. Um, and again, we're becoming, right? We're becoming the people that ultimately we were created to be. And so I think that there's kind of a rhythm, a natural rhythm of life where these things come up, and whatever it is that needs our attention is going to be in the forefront. And I think we should respond to that kind of an invitation to grow in that
I
area.
like that idea of seasons, and it's biblical. And on gardening, on that particular theme, I've got a favorite book of mine, and it lays out something. This is something simple, but I like structures like this. And it says, hey, in the month of January, do these three
Mhm.
things in your gardening world, whatever that looks like do these three things. And it leaves it at that. And then it'll say, hey, it's September. It's time to do these three things. Don't forget to do this. Don't forget
Mhm.
to do that, and do that. And I like structures like that. And I feel like I really look at the world in that kind of way. Like you said some things right there talking about seasons and talking about you can't do everything at once. And I think of, well, okay, I've heard Jocko Willink. I don't know if that's a new name to you. Let me know.
No,
He'll say
I know
prioritize.
Jocko.
Awesome. Awesome. He'll say prioritize and execute, because we do have all these different things that are going on. The marriage and parenting and work and our own personal development journeys and things and habits and hobbies and interests, et cetera. All
Mhm.
these different things are going on. And he says, well, prioritize and execute. And then that's just like one filter in the way that I view life. That's one filter. Prioritize and execute.
Mhm.
That makes sense. That's effective. That'll work. That's how you can handle a lot of things at the same time, but not at the same time, kind of thing. And then on top of that, you've got this concept of seasons. Well, it's September. It's not time for me to be planting seeds in my garden,
Mhm.
and you could extrapolate that out and make that real relevant in the IBC world. Here's one clear example. You might want to consider where we're at in a boom bust cycle, because there are some good times. It's always good to be well capitalized, but you can understand what I'm saying, that depending on where we're at in the boom bust cycle, maybe it's better to be well capitalized and have reserves and access to significant capital for either obstacles or opportunities that will present
Mhm.
themselves, right? Um,
Yeah.
and that's a seasonal thing. That's a seasonal thing. So those are some of my thoughts. All right, you said you were familiar with Jocko. Books, his podcast, just his
Well,
name. I'm curious now.
only from a friend of mine who's I think her husband set her alarm on her phone to some sort of Jocko quote or something. So she was waking up to that. I think that didn't last very long. She's like, this is not the way I want to wake up. But
I know
he's very
exactly. It's
driven, as I understand.
yeah,
Like get up and
psychological
go do something,
warfare.
right?
Yeah, he's got these audios, psychological warfare, and he's not yelling at you.
Yeah.
He's not screaming at you. It's really fun, but he's saying things in this deep, booming voice, real straightforward, real calm. Yeah, I know that. My wife laughed when I played that out loud for her the first time. But his principle of prioritize and execute. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Well, let's hang out there for just a second.
Okay.
Nelson said of IBC, he said it's more caught than taught.
Yep.
So, well, of all the things I've said so far, I think you might listen to all that. Someone might think, well, I just don't know enough. I have to know. Man, it sounds like you really have to know what you're doing. all these things, but it's not really that. It's like you're saying, what is the next step? What is the next thing? Well, starting is a big part of it, right?
Well, paint the
It
picture then,
is
Becca. Keep
important.
going. I'm not trying
It
to
is.
interrupt you. Paint that picture right there then. What they hear the words for the first time. What do they do next? What is their next
Right. What are
Step
the
to pro.
in that even though we're not in this consumer mentality of, oh, I bought a product, so now I've done the thing, right? That is the first step, right? That is the first step. And once you're in that system and you're starting to figure out how this works and how do I take a loan and how do I repay it and just the things that you have to learn, quite
Mhm.
frankly, it's not hard. It's just something that you have to learn. Um, you start catching it, right? You start catching, oh, okay, this is what they were talking about. And there are things that you'll never understand if you don't implement, if you don't start, right? If you don't start somewhere, and it might be the first of a system of policies. And most people start too small. That's what my first agent told me. He said everybody starts too small, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good sales line, and
There are
then I
those
get down
thoughts.
the
There are those
road,
thoughts.
and I'm like, oh, we started too small. I was thinking too small. I was a little bit afraid to capitalize, all those kinds of things. And so in what you're talking about, in January, do this, in February, do this with your garden.
Mhm.
I think it's more like that when you're learning. You're like, okay, I'm gonna take a loan for this. I'm gonna learn how to pay that back. Okay, that makes sense. Maybe a few months down the road, I'm gonna do something. It's little bites, right? It's little by little, and the more you use it, and the more you are able um, to see that system working and recapturing more and more of what was previously flowing through your hands, you get excited about that. Oh, wow. Maybe I don't want just one garden plot. Maybe I want two. Maybe I want to expand this system because more and more becomes natural. I'm sure the more you garden, the more you just know. I don't have to look that up in a book anymore, right? I
Yeah.
just know in January I'm going to do this, in February I'm going to do this. And I think it's the same thing. The more of it, the more it becomes automatic, then you have more capacity to learn what's the next thing, to take on more, to add volume, to add scale to what you're doing, because it doesn't seem intimidating anymore because you've done it, you've experienced it, it's proven itself to you as far as just the mechanics of how things work. And that gives you confidence, I think, to move forward and take action and grow.
Yep, that makes me think of a Zig Ziglar quote. I'm pretty sure Zig said, "Go as far as you can go, and when you
Mhm.
do, you'll always be able to see further, because you've
Yeah.
gone that amount,
Yeah.
right?" That's what popped
Yeah,
into
for
my
sure.
mind.
Yeah. I think sometimes people read in Nelson's book and where he says that your premium should equal your income eventually. And that just seems
Eventually.
like, what? Like, that's crazy talk, right?
Yep.
But we're not talking about anytime soon. We're talking about, he says it'll probably take 20 years for it, minimum for that. And that's if you want to, if you choose to. Not everybody's going to take it that far. And you don't have to. A lot of people, just use it as more of a savings or a capitalization strategy for things they're going to finance. And the scale of it's up to you. You're the banker, right? And you can take that as far as you want or not.
Yeah, that's always interesting to me when you hear from different, even professionals in this space. So they're implementing the concept in a big way personally, and then they're helping other
Mhm.
people do it professionally. It's always interesting to me when you do get a gauge on how they view that, whether they're using it as the ideal place to store capital, but they might even throw out a percentage and say, well, yeah, I'll probably allocate this percentage of my cash flows or my income to it. And maybe for some people that's like, wow, that's a significant number. And then for other people, it's like, really, I figured it would have been more. And, at the end of the day, I'm not judging. I'm saying it's interesting. And that is the thing,
Mhm.
is that you are becoming your own banker when you implement this concept. You can take it as far as you want. It's the infinite banking concept, which means
Right?
you can be as small with it as you want to be. It could just be the ideal place to store capital for
Mhm.
X, Y, or Z. Me, and our approach has been systematically over going on a decade now. We've been trying to build a system of policies that will eventually accommodate all of our cash flow. That's not necessarily the end state, and that's the idea, right? It's a bank, it's a food bank. That means that food comes in and food goes out. It's a blood bank.
Right.
Blood comes in, blood comes out. And
Mhm.
and that's just our framework. That's just our foundation. That's our private family bank for the things that we want to do, business, investing, lifestyle, etc. But
Mhm.
I don't know. That's another one of those moments where I'm like, man, when you really catch it, how do you not see it going all the way to, I want to get all of our cash flow through here. I mean, that's just where I'm at. And that's the thought that I'll share.
Well, when
That
you
it,
think about it, I think it's as much capturing time as it's capturing money. Because if we go with our normal, you know, quote unquote normal framework of how we do things in America, that you would deposit all your money in the bank, right? And then from there you pay your bills, you make investments, you save, you do all the things you need to do. The savings percentage of that's actually earning for you is so very small, right? So we think, okay, this is only probably 5 or 10% if I'm being generous for most American households. So I have to get this huge rate of return. I have to get this huge return because my volume is so small, right?
yes, yes.
But if the volume of what we're sending through a system instead of a traditional banking system, in this case, just changing financial institutions, sending
Mm-hmm.
that through an insurance company instead. If
Bring
the
in some new
volume of
ownership.
that, if the volume of that can be so much greater because we have access to that money, because we're not sending it away forever, the rate of return doesn't even matter because the volume is so much higher. I don't know if that's communicating
I love how
very
you put
well.
that. Yeah.
But the fact that you have access to the money, I think, is huge. Because that frees you up to not just save your excess. I mean, that's where we all start, right? That's where we started. I've got this much excess cash flow. That's what we're gonna save into this.
Mm-hmm.
But now trying to think differently, or what are the things we're paying anyway that maybe we could run through here first? Could we increase the volume of money that's going through our personal banking system, to earn interest on so much more money, instead of trying to get this huge rate of return, take all this risk on a little bitty number.
Yep.
I'm not sure where I was going with all that.
Well, you're helping
Somebody
me.
should
So
spark that.
here's the visual that pops in my mind as you describe rate of return versus the volume of interest. Which is better, 100% of a grape or 50% of a watermelon? I mean, that's the simple visual that pops into my mind. 50% of a watermelon.
That's
So much more volume describes what's actually best, in that visual. And when you apply that to money, people are wanting to get the highest rate of return that they can on a sliver of their gross cash flows over the course of their lifetime. Whereas, do what you say, consider this idea of becoming your own banker by diverting whatever percentage of your cash flow to start, or as you grow that you choose, to this private banking system that just happens to be sold by a different financial institution. Like you said, it's just changing that financial institution, which inherently means, and that's when I didn't mean to cut you off or anything or speak over you, but it's a change of ownership. Somebody owns banks, commercial banks, but not Jesse, not Becca, not the person that's listening to this, probably, right? So what if we just changed ownership of the financial institution? And that's why we use mutual life insurance companies, because we're part owners of the companies, and we can enjoy the dividends when we get those, and we get to have these contracts that financial institution just happens to have. That is the ideal place to put capital. I love it. If I went back to what you said about, your agent and everybody else's agent, and when we say agent that way, we're talking about infinite banking. When you get your first infinite banking policy, my first policy's not my biggest one. We pay more premiums into other policies that we've bought since then. It was a pretty good, robust number for us at the time. Pretty good percentage of our cash flow is actually my first policy, but it's still not our biggest. And I think that's good for people to hear, right? That you also, like me, had somebody tell you, well, most people start too small, and that's okay. We'd rather take quality steps, like Bruce Wayner would say, we'd rather take quality steps than try and run and fall flat on our face kind of thing. So that makes sense. But then the natural, going back to when we were talking about consumerism in the beginning, the natural consumer, of course, is going to say, oh, well, of course, my agent is going to tell me that I thought they're just trying to get me to buy more. They're wanting to sell me another one or whatever. And sure, we're in that business for sure. But then when you're on this side of it, and we're still consumers, like Becca and Jesse are purchasers of whole life insurance. We're professionals in the infinite banking space. Yeah. But we're also consumers. We buy whole life insurance. And now we're looking back and saying, okay, we can go bigger, because we're on this side of that amount of time where we realize that for ourselves. But that's a real thing for a consumer, especially in the beginning.
And I certainly never want to push any of my clients to a place where they're uncomfortable at all.
Yep.
Let's take a small.
Well, maybe uncomfortable in their thinking.
Yeah. Start small and I guess all you've lost is a little bit of time if you start too small, like we all do, right? And then you can most likely go back and add more policies on yourself or other people. It's not it's not the end of the world. But I think you just starting and experiencing and taking those steps to take a loan and pay it back and those types of things just really builds a lot of confidence and understanding from experience that you really can't learn any other way.
Yes.
I guess that's what I would say.
Yes, more's caught than taught, like you said earlier. Absolutely on that point. I'll tell you what, this is a bit tactical, but I've had more convertible term conversations here recently than I've been having more and more of them here recently. And that's another one of those aspects that I wish I had been exposed to earlier so that I could catch on to it and I could implement it earlier. And I think that that's happening more because there's more and better and a greater volume of quality infinite banking material out in the wide world nowadays, which again brings me to saying, man, what a great thing that I have a friend who's written a book about infinite banking now that I can say, hey, you need to be reading this and you need to be reading this to your children and that kind of stuff, like your book, right? But I thought that's been really cool. Different conversations that I've had where folks are catching on to this idea because they heard it or they've asked me and they're just asking quality enough questions. I'm like, you know what? It seems like it's an appropriate time for us to go ahead and introduce this idea of convertible term into our conversation. So it's a bit of a tactical thing, but good for people to catch on to when they're ready.
I think the reality is sometimes people love this idea, but the timing just isn't quite right for whatever reason. Maybe it's a health issue, maybe it's a cash flow issue, whatever. And I think being able to lock in that insurability and say, okay, I know 100% I'm going to be able to do this in a couple of years, regardless of what happens. And we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to, I've only had my policy, our first policy going on about 4 years now. And I was a super preferred rating then. And just 4 years later, I hope I would be standard just because of some normal, I had skin cancer cut off my back or a colonoscopy or just these routine things. It's nothing major, but I, you just never know. You never know what.
But that's life, and this is life insurance that we're using. Yeah. So yeah.
That's right. That's right. So I think that convertible term is a really great option to say, okay, for whatever reason, I'm not starting right now, or maybe I'm going to supplement what I'm doing with this convertible term policy and to be able to add to my system later and have that on a guaranteed basis, not have to worry about, will I qualify or what if something happens or those kinds of things.
Yep. For me recently, it's been a combination of, maybe one spouse wants to up the death benefit coverage and that can make sense for sure. Everybody should be adequately protected, period.
Yeah,
I think everybody should be adequately protected. And when you can do that with a policy that can be converted for your banking purposes in the future as well, then good. Yeah. Here recently, it's been folks that are getting whole life policies, but then they're also having that conversation with me about, well, what if we do go ahead and lock in more insurability now? And what if we do go ahead and up that death benefit number today? It'd make us feel better. Awesome. You can check both those boxes at the same time. Becca, I'm going to have to put a pin in this. I even had a section of rapid fire questions that I was hoping to get to, but I didn't write enough down. And I definitely didn't even circle back to all the notes that I'd written for all of the points that you brought up. So real quick, how can folks get in touch with you? And I'll put stuff in the note section as well.
Sure. My website is salientssolutionsibc.com. So it's kind of a mouthful, but that's where you can find me. My book, Beaver Bankers, is on Amazon. I don't know if we've talked about this, Jesse, but I also have another book on Amazon, just an ebook format called A Beginner's Handbook to Infinite Banking. So it's kind of
No, how have you not sent that to me?
I don't know.
All right, send
but
it to
me. And put it in the notes
okay,
section.
yeah. So that was just kind of my after reading Nelson's book. Between that and taking out my first policy, here are the things I wish I would have known. So to kind of just help people get started. Yeah, but this has been great conversation. Thanks for having me on, and it's always a good time.
It's always great talking with you. All right, next time we'll pick up where we live off today, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Appreciate you. You have a good day.
See you soon.
Well, that was a lot of fun for me to go ahead and have another conversation with my friend Becca. Her information will be in the notes below. And if you have questions about infinite banking and you'd like to have a conversation about what that could look like for you to implement in your household or your business or your investing, then don't hesitate to reach out to her on her website. You can find me at durhamtalents.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. I look forward to our next conversation. Live and leave a lasting legacy. Have a great day. Take care.